Have you ever loved someone so much that it hurt to breathe? So much that even when you knew it would destroy you, you couldn't stop yourself? Now imagine that kind of love. Inside an angel, a being made of light, a creature who had never known pain, never known loss, never even known what it meant to fall. He was born in glory. He stood before the throne of God, surrounded by endless light, endless perfection, endless songs of praise. But somewhere inside that perfection, a single spark of emotion began to burn. Something heaven had never seen before. Compassion. Ramiel, that was his name, the angel of mercy, the one who felt too much. When God made mankind, most angels watched in silence, curious, distant, obedient. But Ramiel, he felt something stir inside him. He looked down and saw us, fragile, clumsy, imperfect, yet carrying a spark of God's image. And for the first time in all of creation, an angel's heart trembled. He saw our pain, he saw our mistakes, and he loved us anyway. While heaven saw dust, Ramiel saw beauty. While the other angels whispered that humanity would fail, Ramiel whispered, even if they fall, they are worth saving. But mercy in heaven is not weakness until it challenges justice. And Ramiel's heart began to question the balance. How could God love humans so much yet let them suffer? How could divine justice allow pain, hunger, and death in the world he called good? Ramiel didn't rebel. He wept. He wept for the world below. He wept for the broken, and his tear shook heaven itself. But in heaven, even tears have consequences. Because when an angel begins to feel too deeply, when he begins to love beyond heaven's limits, something inside him begins to fall. Ramiel didn't fall like Lucifer, in fire and pride. He fell quietly, softly. He fell with tears in his eyes and love still in his heart. And the saddest part, he never wanted to leave heaven. He just couldn't stand watching us suffer anymore. So let me ask you something. Can love become a sin when it's too pure? And what happens when mercy itself gets punished by heaven? This is not a story about rebellion. It's not about pride or power. This is about the angel who cried for us, the one who loved humanity so deeply that heaven had to let him go. This is the story of Ramiel, the angel who cried for humanity. They say every angel carries a piece of God's glory, but Ramiel, he carried something else. He carried God's heart. Before creation was ever spoken into being, when heaven was only light and song, Ramiel stood among the countless hosts, radiant, pure, flawless. But there was something in his gaze that set him apart. While the others looked toward the throne, Ramiel looked outward, into the quiet void where one day stars would burn. It was as if he was searching for something heaven hadn't given him yet. Most angels were content with praise. Their purpose was clear, their joy eternal. But Ramiel would often wander near the edges of heaven, watching the expanse below, asking silent questions that no one dared voice. Why does love hurt, even when it's perfect? What is the purpose of mercy in a world without pain? The other angels didn't understand him. To them, heaven was enough. There was no need for questions, no need for emotion. But Ramiel, he felt. He didn't just worship, he wondered. And God saw it. Among all the angels, Ramiel's voice carried the gentlest tone when he sang. His worship wasn't thunderous. It was soft, trembling, as if it came from something fragile within. He was the angel who would kneel beside the weary, the one who comforted the angels who failed their duties, the one who stayed silent when others judged. Ramiel's love for heaven wasn't duty. It was devotion, pure, unfiltered, unforced. And yet somewhere deep inside him, he carried a quiet ache. He often stood near the river of living light, the celestial stream that flowed from God's throne, and watched the reflections of eternity ripple across it. There he would whisper to himself, there must be more to love than perfection. One day another angel, Michael, found him there and asked, why do you always linger here alone, brother? What is it you see in the light that we do not? Ramiel smiled faintly. I see what could be, he said, not just what is. Michael didn't understand, but he admired him. Even in heaven, there was something about Ramiel that inspired calm. When angels argued, Ramiel brought peace. When doubt rose, he quieted it. He didn't lead with strength, he led with tenderness. But that tenderness would become his greatest weakness. When God finally formed mankind, when his hands shaped the dust and breathed life into it, Ramiel was there. He saw the first man open his eyes. He saw him breathe, stumble, laugh. And for the first time in heaven's history, an angel's eyes filled with tears. Because in that moment, Ramiel realized something terrifyingly beautiful. Humans could feel something angels never could. They could hurt, and only through pain could love become real. Ramiel began to watch humanity like a guardian who couldn't stay away. He saw their mistakes, their struggles, their small, fragile dreams. He watched them love, lose, break, and still choose to live again. To him, humans were the most honest reflection of God. Not because they were perfect, but because they were broken and still tried. But not everyone in heaven agreed. Many angels began to grow cold toward mankind. They saw humans as reckless, ungrateful, unholy. Some whispered that God's love for humanity was undeserved. Ramiel couldn't bear to hear it. He would defend humans, even in the courts of heaven, saying they are not failures. They are the image of his patience. But his words began to stir unease. Mercy was beautiful, until it started questioning justice. Lucifer, the morning star, would sometimes smile at Ramiel and say, "You have too much heart for your own good, brother. One day it will break you," and Ramiel would answer softly, "If my heart breaks for love, then let it." Lucifer laughed, but somewhere, even he feared what Ramiel was becoming. Because when an angel begins to love too much, heaven starts to tremble. Ramiel didn't know it yet, but every tear he shed for mankind was changing him. The light within him, once bright and perfect, began to flicker with something new, something no angel had ever known before: compassion mixed with pain. And pain has a way of rewriting even the holiest hearts. He began to dream, something no angel was ever meant to do. Dreams of walking among men, touching the earth, holding the hand of a child, wiping the tears of the dying. It was innocence, turning into longing, and longing in heaven is forbidden. But he couldn't stop it, because the more he looked at humanity, the more he saw the reflection of the God he loved. And maybe that was the greatest mystery of all, that the image of God could exist not just in angels, but in fragile, imperfect flesh. That realization was the beginning of his fall, not in rebellion, but in love, because mercy always begins as love and ends as sacrifice. Ramiel never forgot the first time he saw a human cry. It was in the days when the world was still young, when the air smelled of Eden and every sunrise felt like God smiling. The garden was perfect, humanity was pure. But even in that perfection, Ramiel felt something strange, a whisper in his heart that told him peace never lasts forever. Then came the moment that changed everything. The silence of Eden was broken by a single sound. Not thunder, not wind, not music, but weeping. The first tear ever shed on earth. It came from Eve. Her face was pressed to the ground, her voice trembling with regret. And beside her stood Adam, his eyes heavy with the weight of what they'd done. They had eaten what was forbidden. The garden was no longer home. And heaven was silent. The angels watched from above, still, motionless, unsure how to react. But not Ramiel. He stepped forward. He watched the woman cry, and something inside him shattered. He had seen light. He had seen stars die. He had seen worlds born. He didn't know love could hurt like that. He whispered, "They didn't understand, Father. They didn't mean to fall this way." But heaven gave no reply. The command was already given. Man must leave Eden. Ramiel stood at the edge of the garden as the flaming sword was placed at its gate. He watched Adam turn back one last time before walking away. And that's when it happened. Something no angel had ever done. Ramiel wept. A single tear fell from his eye, glowing with the light of heaven. It struck the earth and vanished into the dust. That was the moment heaven first saw compassion bleed. Some say the ground where that tear fell became fertile forever, that life always bloomed there, because his sorrow carried something holy, something unplanned. From that day, Ramiel couldn't look at humanity the same way again. He saw them wandering, struggling, trying to live, yet never able to return home, and he couldn't bear it. He spoke softly to the other angels. They are lost, not wicked. Can't you see that? They are searching for the same light we were made from. But heaven was divided. Justice demanded consequence. Mercy begged for another chance. And somewhere in between those two voices, Ramiel stood alone. Days in heaven felt like centuries as he watched the earth change. The first death, the first lie, the first war. Each time humanity suffered, Ramiel's heart broke a little more. When Cain killed Abel, Ramiel fell to his knees. He had seen death in the universe before, but never born from love, never brother against brother. He whispered, "How could they know death if we never showed them mercy?" But still, silence from above. He began to notice it then, how the light within him flickered faintly whenever he felt sorrow. The angels around him began to distance themselves. Michael warned him gently, "You're beginning to feel like them, brother. That path leads nowhere." Ramiel's answer was quiet, almost a whisper. "If feeling pain brings me closer to understanding them, then maybe pain is holy." Michael looked at him with sadness and fear, because heaven had no place for tears, only perfection, only obedience. But Ramiel's heart no longer fit there. He began visiting the veil between heaven and earth more often, watching, listening. Sometimes he could almost hear the prayers of men, desperate, broken, honest. He wanted to answer them. He wanted to comfort them. But every time he reached his hand toward earth, divine fire would flare at his side. A warning. He was not allowed. And still, he whispered through the barrier, hoping they'd somehow feel it. "You're not alone. Heaven still loves you, but those whispers never reached them." The world only grew darker. Humanity began to forget heaven. But Ramiel never forgot them. One night, if nights even existed in heaven, he stood before God's light and said quietly, "Father, if they must be punished, then let me share their pain. Let me understand what it means to fall, so I can help them rise." He didn't know it then, but those words sealed his fate. Because in that moment, Ramiel's compassion crossed into defiance. He didn't mean to challenge God. He meant to understand him. But in heaven, even love has limits, and Ramiel was beginning to break them. Word spread across the celestial realms. The angel of mercy had questioned the will of God. Ramiel, the one known for gentleness, had spoken words that sounded almost human. The archangels were gathered. Michael stood in command, his expression torn between brotherhood and duty. Gabriel the messenger looked down with sorrow, and beside them, thousands of angels whispered his name, Ramiel. No one expected this from him. He wasn't like Lucifer, bold and radiant in defiance. He wasn't like the Watchers, reckless and tempted by desire. He was quiet, kind, the one who wept when others judged. But sometimes kindness burns louder than fire. Ramiel stood before the throne, not in pride but trembling. His wings, once brighter than dawn, now dimmed with the weight of sorrow. "Father," he said softly, "why must they suffer so much? You said they were made in your image. So why do we punish them for being what you made?" The words echoed through eternity. Every angel in heaven froze. Even the light of the throne pulsed, as if the question itself had wounded the sky. God's voice came like the sound of creation itself, calm, vast, and infinite. "My mercy is greater than their sin, Ramiel. But my justice is also perfect. Do you question my design?" Ramiel's voice trembled. "I don't question your perfection. I just don't understand why love must hurt, why pain must exist in a world you called good." Then for the first time since time began, an angel fell silent before God. Not out of reverence, but out of heartbreak. Michael stepped forward. "Brother, stop. You speak what you don't understand." But Ramiel looked at him, tears glimmering like glass. "Then let me understand. Let me feel what they feel. if that's what it takes to love them as you do." A gasp swept through the hosts. No angel had ever asked for such a thing. Gabriel turned away. "Ramiel, if you step down to them, you can never come back. You'll lose your place, your light, your eternity." "I'd rather lose eternity," Ramiel said, "than watch love suffer in silence." And with that, heaven's heart cracked. The light around him began to tremble, reacting to something forbidden, a love that crossed divine boundaries. The throne blazed with holy fire, yet Ramiel didn't flinch. He whispered one last plea. "Father, if my love for them is wrong, take it from me. But if it comes from you, then let me bear it." No answer came, only silence. And sometimes silence is the answer. Ramiel looked up, his tears falling freely now. He spread his wings, glowing with light that pulsed like a heartbeat. And slowly, that light began to fade. He wasn't cast down like Lucifer. He chose to descend. He turned one last time to the legions of heaven and said, "Do not weep for me. I am not falling from grace. I am falling into love." Then he was gone. The hosts cried out. Michael covered his face. Gabriel whispered, "May mercy go with you, brother." And heaven, for the first time, wept. They say his fall was unlike any other. No fire, no rage, no rebellion, only light turning soft, fading into the horizon. He didn't crash into earth, he landed. The earth trembled softly where he touched down, his wings now dim, folded around him like a cloak. And for the first time, Ramiel felt the weight of the world he had loved from afar. He felt hunger, cold, pain. He felt human. And yet, he smiled, because for the first time in all of existence, mercy had found its way to earth, but heaven had lost its heart. When Ramiel touched the earth, the world didn't shake with judgment. It sighed softly, like a long-awaited breath. The soil still remembered the tear he'd once shed over Eden, and it seemed to recognize him. Wherever he stepped, grass grew greener, water shimmered clearer, and the air felt lighter. Yet his own light was fading. Every heartbeat he borrowed from the mortal world drained a little of the glow that once crowned his wings. He felt gravity for the first time. He felt hunger. He felt the ache of skin that bruised and healed and bled. And strangely, he loved it, because in every sensation, pain or pleasure, he found a truth heaven never taught him, that love only means something when it costs something. He wandered from place to place unseen by most. Sometimes he appeared as a traveler resting beside lonely wells, sometimes as a stranger who listened more than he spoke. To the forgotten and the frightened, his presence felt like calm. A mother who'd lost her child said a man sat with her all night, silent, eyes full of sorrow too deep for words. When she looked up again, he was gone, and the pain in her chest had softened, just enough to let her breathe. A wounded soldier claimed that, on the edge of death, someone knelt beside him and whispered, "You are forgiven for being afraid." He lived. No scar remained where the blade had entered. They didn't know his name, but stories of the weeping stranger spread quietly through villages and valleys. And every night, when the stars appeared, Ramiel looked up and wondered if heaven still watched him, or if heaven had forgotten. He missed the music of the higher realms, the endless light, the warmth of belonging. But when he saw humans laughing through their tears, forgiving those who hurt them, and loving even when it broke them, he realized something. Heaven wasn't lost. It was here, hidden inside human hearts. One evening, as he helped a dying man in a small desert hut, the man whispered, "Why do you cry for us, stranger? You look at us as if you know something we don't." Ramiel answered, "Because I see what you are. You fall, you fail, yet every time you rise again. You think you're reaching for God, but He's the one reaching for you." The man smiled faintly and passed away with peace on his face. Ramiel sat there for hours, staring at the empty shell of life, and whispered, "So this is what it means to love like him, to hurt, to lose, and still call it good." And in that moment, something stirred above the clouds. A single feather of light drifted down from heaven, pure, radiant, untouched by time. It landed at his feet. Ramiel looked at it and understood. He wasn't forgotten. He was being taught. Mercy wasn't rebellion. It was a lesson even angels had to learn the hard way. From that day, Ramiel no longer wished to return to heaven. He simply wanted to walk among those who reminded him of God the most. The broken, the kind, the ones who kept loving even when it hurt. Some say that when a stranger comforts you in silence, when an impossible peace fills the room for no reason, it's Ramiel, still here, still weeping softly for the world he loves too much to leave. The years passed quietly. Ramiel didn't count them. Time had never meant anything in heaven, and on earth it only hurt to measure. He wandered through storms and cities, deserts and seas, helping quietly, leaving before anyone could remember his face. He watched generations rise and fall, and with each passing soul, a part of him began to ache with something far deeper than sorrow. It was longing, not to return home, but to understand why love had to hurt this much. He'd seen the world through mortal eyes. He'd seen mothers bury their sons, fathers lose faith in their prayers, lovers part under the weight of distance and death. And yet somehow, every time the sun rose again, these fragile beings kept choosing to hope. How? How could something so temporary still believe in eternity? That question haunted Ramiel. One evening, he reached the edge of a mountain that pierced the clouds. From there, he could see the whole world bathed in gold, rivers glimmering, forests breathing, the hum of life rising like music. He fell to his knees, not because he was weak, but because he finally understood. All along, he had pitied humanity, cried for them, mourned their pain, but never realized that they were living the kind of love angels could never truly grasp. A love that breaks, a love that bleeds, a love that dies and still chooses to rise again. He bowed his head and whispered, "Father, forgive me." I wept for them as if they were lost, but they were the ones who reminded me who you are. The wind stirred softly around him, warm, familiar, almost like a breath. He closed his eyes, feeling it brush against his face like a hand, like the touch of a presence he had long thought distant. And for a heartbeat, he could hear the voice that once called his name across eternity. "Ramiel, you have wept enough. You have understood what even angels forget, that compassion is not weakness and mercy is not defiance. You cried for them, and in doing so, you became more like me than you ever knew." His wings, long dulled and gray, began to shimmer again, not blinding gold like before, but soft silver, humble and scarred, carrying the glow of a light that had learned how to suffer. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "So this is what grace feels like." And as he knelt there, the skies broke open, not with thunder, not with judgment, but with light. Not the cold light of heaven's perfection, but a warm, trembling radiance that felt alive. He lifted his gaze one last time and saw something that made him fall silent. Humanity, every soul he'd ever comforted, every tear he'd ever wiped, every kindness he'd ever offered. They were all rising like stars around him, glowing brighter than angels ever could. He realized then he hadn't fallen to earth to be punished. He'd fallen to understand. And as his body faded into the wind, a soft voice, maybe his own, maybe God's, whispered through the mountains, "If you ever feel alone in your sorrow, know that heaven still cries with you. And maybe, just maybe, that tear you feel isn't yours at all. It's Ramiel's, the angel who cried for humanity." We spend so much of our lives wondering why pain exists, but maybe pain is proof that our hearts still work. Maybe it's God's way of reminding us that we were made to love, deeply, dangerously, endlessly, and somewhere an angel still watches, still weeping, still believing in us,